Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comments section. Now let's begin. Story 1. Heinz Barth was born on October 15, 1920, in the small town of Grandsee, in Germany. His father was a postal worker, and his mother took care of the home. The family was not rich, but they had enough to live on. Germany was a poor and unstable country during this time because it had lost World War I. Many people, including the Barth family, struggled with money and felt angry about the country's situation. As a boy, Heinz went to the local school. He was an average student. He liked mechanical things and enjoyed working with his hands. When he was a teenager, he learned about cars and motors. This was a useful skill. Outside of school, he spent time with friends from similar families. They often talked about politics. Many young men were angry and wanted Germany to be strong again. In 1933, when Heinz was 13 years old, the Nazi Party came to power in Germany. The new government started many youth programs. These programs taught young people to be proud of Germany and to obey the Nazi leaders. Heinz, like many boys his age, joined one of these groups. It was called the Hitler Youth. Here, he wore a uniform, learned marching drills, and was taught that following orders was the most important thing. After he finished school, Heinz needed a job. Because of his interest in machines, he found work as a mechanic's helper. He fixed cars and trucks. In 1938, when he was 18, he joined a Nazi organization for drivers and mechanics called the National Socialist Motor Corps. Here, he received paramilitary training. He learned to drive and repair vehicles in a structured, army-like way. He was good at following the rules of this organization. On November 9, 1939, Heinz Barth formally joined the Nazi Party. This was a special anniversary date for the Nazis. By joining the party, he showed his strong support for their ideas. World War II had already begun. Soon after, he enlisted in the German military police. Because of his training and his loyalty to the Nazi Party, he was made an officer in the military police. His job was to maintain order and security. In the summer of 1942, Barth was a member of a security police battalion. This unit was sent to occupied Czechoslovakia. The court records from much later state that during this time, Barth participated in the execution of 92 Czech civilians. This happened under martial law. The court also stated he was involved in killing men and women in a village called Ležáky in June 1942. These were his actions as a young man in his early 20s, following the orders of his commanders. Heinz Barth's early life was shaped by a poor country, a political system that demanded obedience, and organizations that taught him to follow orders without question. He learned skills with vehicles and rose to a position of low-level authority in the Nazi system. His path led him to serious actions in Czechoslovakia as part of his police duties. In October 1943, Heinz Barth was transferred to a combat unit known as the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich. By June 1944, he was a section leader in the 3rd Company of the division's Der Führer Panzer Grenadier Regiment. The division had been moved to southern France after the Allied landings in Normandy. Their orders were to resist the French resistance and move toward the fighting in the north. On the morning of June 10, 1944, Barth's company commander, Major Adolf Diekmann, gathered his officers and section leaders, including Barth. Diekmann said they had orders to investigate the town of Oradour-sur-Glane. The German High Command believed a German officer was being held prisoner there by the resistance. The real intelligence was flawed and pointed to a different village named Oradour, but Diekmann's unit proceeded to Oradour-sur-Glane. The soldiers surrounded the quiet village in the afternoon. Barth and the other men under Diekman's command moved through the streets. They told the mayor, through an interpreter, that they were conducting a routine identity check. They ordered the mayor to gather all the villagers in the central marketplace. Using loudspeakers and going door to door, the soldiers told everyone to come out immediately. They said people would only be checked for papers and could return home soon. School teachers were told to bring their students to the square. The villagers, believing this was a standard check, complied. They gathered in the marketplace. Barth and other section leaders organized the soldiers to form a wide circle around the crowd with their weapons. Once the people were assembled, the orders changed. The soldiers separated the men from the women and children. They told the men they were going to be searched in groups in several nearby barns and garages. They told the women and children they were to wait in the village church for their turn. The men were divided into groups and taken to 6 different locations around the village. Barth was put in charge of the group, taking one of the largest groups of men to a barn on the Rue Emile de Sordos. Approximately 60 to 70 men were marched inside. The soldiers then stacked hay, wood, and other flammable materials inside the barn doors. The men inside realized something was very wrong. Barth gave the order to his soldiers. They aimed their machine guns and rifles at the barn doors and windows. On his command, they opened fire into the building. Barth later admitted that he himself fired his weapon into the barn roughly 12 to 15 times. After the first volley of gunfire, the soldiers added more fuel to the barn and set it on fire. Any man who tried to escape the flames was shot. The same horrifying process happened at the other 5 locations where the men were held. Meanwhile, the women and children, nearly 400 of them, were locked inside the village church. Soldiers brought a large, heavy box inside and left it near the altar. This box contained an explosive and incendiary device. They lit a fuse and left, locking the church doors. The device exploded, creating panic, smoke, and fire. When the women and children tried to escape through the doors and windows, machine gun teams waiting outside fired on them. The church was also set fully on fire. While the killings happened, other soldiers went through every house and building in the village. They stole valuables. Then, they used explosives and fire to destroy every structure. They killed any villagers they found who had hidden during the initial roundup, including the elderly and infirm. The operation lasted several hours. By evening, the entire village was burning. The soldiers then assembled and left the area. A total of 642 villagers were killed that day. This included 190 men, 247 women, and 205 children. The military objective, finding a captured German officer, was not achieved because he was never there. The village was completely destroyed. The soldiers reported the action as a combat operation against terrorists. In the following days, French authorities from nearby towns discovered the atrocity. They found the burned ruins and the remains of the victims. The news spread shock and horror, but the German army had already moved on. The ruins of Oradour-sur-Glane were left untouched as a memorial. After World War II ended in 1945, French authorities began investigating the massacre. A French military court in Bordeaux held a trial in 1953 for the known perpetrators. Heinz Barth was tried in absentia, meaning he was tried while not present in the courtroom because his whereabouts were unknown. The court found him guilty of war crimes and sentenced him to death. However, he could not be found to face this punishment. Heinz Barth had returned to his hometown of Grancy after the war. This town was now in the Soviet-controlled zone of Germany, which became the German Democratic Republic, GDR, or East Germany. Barth did not use his real name openly. He lived under a false identity for many years. He worked in a local factory and lived a quiet, ordinary life. The East German secret police, known as the Stasi, eventually learned his true identity through their own internal files and monitoring. They began a secret investigation into his past actions during the war. The Stasi investigation gathered evidence for years. They collected documents from wartime archives and statements from other witnesses. On June 14, 1981, Stasi officers arrested Heinz Barth at his home in Grancy. He was now 60 years old. He was held in prison while the state prepared its case. The East German government decided to put him on trial to show its opposition to fascism. His trial began in 1983 in an East German court. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence of his actions in Oradour-sur-Glane and in Czechoslovakia. Barth did not deny his presence at the massacre. He testified that he followed orders from his commander, Major Diekmann. He said he believed he would have been court-martialed if he had refused. The prosecutor, Horst Bussy, rejected this defense. Barth broke down on the witness stand, crying and expressing shame for what he had done as a young man. The court found Heinz Barth guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The prosecutor did not ask for the death penalty because Barth had cooperated with the investigation. Instead, the prosecutor requested life imprisonment. The judge agreed and sentenced Barth to life in prison. He was the only SS officer from the Oradour massacre to ever be convicted in a court of law. Other higher-ranking officers, like General Lammerding, who commanded the division, lived freely in West Germany and were never brought to trial. Barth served his sentence in an East German prison. After German reunification in 1990, his case was reviewed by the new unified German state. In 1991, due to a law that did not yet make distinctions for war criminals, he began receiving a state pension as a wounded veteran because he had lost a leg during the war. This caused a public controversy when it was discovered by journalists. People were angry that a convicted war criminal was receiving state money. In 1997, a German court reviewed Barth's case considering his age, his health, and his expressions of remorse. The court decided to release him from prison. He was 76 years old. When asked about his crime upon release, he said he felt guilty but believed he had paid long enough. The controversy over his pension continued. In 2000, a special tribunal canceled his pension, ruling that a war criminal should not benefit from such payments. In 2001, the German parliament passed a new law to prevent all convicted war criminals from receiving state pensions. Heinz Barth died of cancer on August 6, 2007 in Grancy. A local priest announced his death a week later. The site of the massacre, the ruins of Oradour-sur-Glane, remains a memorial museum visited by many people each year to remember the victims. He died a free man, but was the only participant ever held legally accountable for the destruction of Oradour-sur-Glane. Story 2. Erich Priebke was born on July 29, 1913, in the town of Hennigsdorf, Germany. This area was then known as the Kingdom of Prussia. His early childhood was marked by a significant loss. Both of his parents died when he was very young. This event changed the course of his life. After his parents died, Priebke was not raised in an orphanage. Instead, he went to live with one of his uncles. His uncle became his primary guardian. Little specific information is known about his school years or his relationship with this uncle. The focus for the young Priebke became learning a trade so he could support himself. As a teenager, he began training to work in the hospitality industry. He learned the trade of a waiter. This was a practical skill that could provide a steady income. To build his experience, he worked in different hotels and cities. He worked as a waiter in Berlin, the capital of Germany. He also worked at the Savoy Hotel, a famous and prestigious hotel in London, England. Later, he found work on the Italian Riviera, a coastal area in Italy known for its tourism. His time working in Italy was important. During this period, he learned to speak Italian quite well. Knowing this language would later become a key reason for his role in the war. In the 1930s, the political landscape in Germany changed dramatically. The Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, rose to power. In 1936, Erich Priebke joined the SS, which was the paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party. His language skills were noticed by his superiors. Because he could speak Italian, he was considered useful for work involving Italy. He was not a frontline soldier. Instead, he worked for the Gestapo, which was the Nazi secret police. His job often involved interpretation and translation. In 1941, because of his language ability, he was sent to work in Rome, Italy. Rome was an important city, and the Nazis occupied it during the war. In Rome, he worked under a senior SS officer named Herbert Kappler. Priebke's role included helping with communications and relations, including some tasks that involved contact with the Vatican, the center of the Catholic Church, which is located in Rome. During his time in Rome, his personal life also progressed. He had married a woman named Alicia Stoll. They had 2 sons together. Their first son was born in 1940. Their second son was born in 1942. His family was living in Germany while he was stationed in Italy. His life continued in this manner, performing his duties as an SS interpreter and officer in occupied Rome. The work was administrative and involved carrying out the orders of the occupying German forces. On March 23, 1944, a group of Italian resistance fighters called partisans attacked a column of German police soldiers in Rome. The partisans set off a bomb on Via Rasella Street and also threw grenades and fired guns. 33 German soldiers from the SS Police Regiment Bozen were killed in this attack. News of the attack went up the chain of command to Adolf Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany. Hitler was very angry. He ordered a harsh retaliation. His order was that for every German soldier killed, 10 Italian prisoners were to be executed. This meant 330 Italians were to be killed. The task of carrying out this order in Rome fell to Herbert Kappler, the senior SS officer. Kappler then gave the job of organizing the details to his subordinate, Erich Priebke. Priebke's main duty was to compile the list of prisoners who would be killed. He had to gather names from the prisons in Rome to reach the number required by Hitler's order. Priebke worked quickly with others to create the list. They took prisoners from the German military prison on Via Tasso and from the Roman prison of Regina Coeli. The list included many types of people. Some were members of the various Italian resistance groups. Some were ordinary citizens who lived on Via Rasella and had been arrested after the bombing. Many were Jewish men who had been imprisoned simply for being Jewish. The list eventually contained 320 names. Then, another German soldier who was wounded in the bombing died from his injuries. This brought the total number of German dead to 33. Following Hitler's 10 for 1 order, the required number of executions was now 330. However, Kappler decided to add 10 more names to the list, making the total 330. Priebke was responsible for managing this list and making sure the correct prisoners were brought to the execution site. The execution was set for the next day, March 24th, at some old caves outside Rome called the Fosse Ardeatine, or Ardeatine Caves. The prisoners were taken from their cells. They were not told what was going to happen to them. Their hands were tied tightly behind their backs with wire. At the caves, the prisoners were gathered. An SS officer read out names from the list. The prisoners were taken into the dark caves in small groups. Inside, they were forced to kneel. SS officers then shot each prisoner in the back of the head or neck. The bodies fell onto the ground. More prisoners were then forced to kneel over the bodies of those already killed, and they were shot too. Erich Priebke was not just an organizer. He was personally present and active at the killings. He carried a machine pistol. He entered the caves with one of the early groups of prisoners. He shot and killed at least 2 of the prisoners himself. During the process, a serious mistake was discovered. The count of prisoners brought to the caves was wrong. When the shooting was finished, 335 people were dead, not 330. This meant 5 extra people, who were not even on the official retaliation list, had been executed. As the officer in charge of the list, Priebke was responsible for this fatal error. After all the killings were done, German engineers used explosives to collapse the entrance to the caves. This was done to seal the bodies inside and hide the evidence of the massacre. After World War II ended in 1945, Allied authorities began investigating war crimes. Erich Priebke was captured and held in a British prisoner of war camp in Rimini, Italy. He was scheduled to be tried for his role in the Ardeatine Caves massacre. However, in 1946, he managed to escape from the camp. With the help of a network that smuggled Nazis out of Europe, he eventually reached Argentina. For almost 50 years, Priebke lived freely in Argentina. He settled in the town of San Carlos de Bariloche. He worked first as a dishwasher and waiter, and later he owned a delicatessen. He became a respected member of the local German-speaking community, and even served as the head of the local German-Argentine Cultural Association. He lived under his own name and made no secret of his past. The crime remained known, but Priebke's whereabouts were not public. This changed in 1994. An American television news program, ABC News, was researching former Nazis in South America. A producer found a book in a Buenos Aires bookstore titled El Pintor de la Suiza Argentina. The book mentioned that Erich Priebke, a participant in the Rome massacre, was living in Bariloche. The ABC News team, led by reporter Sam Donaldson, traveled to Bariloche to investigate. They confirmed Priebke's identity and location. They approached him outside a school where he taught German. With a camera rolling, Donaldson interviewed Priebke in his car. During the interview, Priebke admitted who he was and described his role in the massacre. He said he was only following orders from his commander, Herbert Kappler. He showed little remorse. This television report was broadcast worldwide in May 1994. The broadcast caused immediate outrage and forced legal action. Within days of the report airing, Argentine authorities arrested Priebke at his home. Because of his age, he was placed under house arrest instead of being sent to a prison cell. Italy quickly formally requested that Argentina send Priebke back to Italy to stand trial. Priebke's lawyers fought the extradition for many months. They argued that the time limit for prosecuting murder had passed under Argentine law. However, Italian and international lawyers argued that crimes against humanity have no time limit. After a long legal battle, Argentina's Supreme Court ruled that Priebke should be extradited to Italy. In 1996, Priebke was flown from Argentina to a military airport in Rome. His trial began in Italy. In court, Priebke did not deny the facts. He admitted he helped make the list and was present at the killings. But he pleaded not guilty, arguing that he was only obeying military orders under threat of death. The first trial resulted in a controversial verdict. The military judges found him guilty but then acquitted him, accepting his following orders defense. This decision caused protests outside the courtroom. The prosecution appealed the verdict. A higher court, the Italian Supreme Court, rejected the following orders defense. The court stated that the massacre, especially the killing of 5 extra people, was a clear war crime for which Priebke bore personal responsibility. His first acquittal was overturned. A new trial was ordered. In 1998, after further appeals, Priebke was finally convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. Due to his advanced age and Italian laws for prisoners over a certain age, he did not go to a regular prison. Instead, he served his life sentence under house arrest at his lawyer's home in Rome. He remained there for the rest of his life. All his further appeals, including one to the European Court of Human Rights, were rejected. Erich Priebke died in Rome on October 11, 2013, at the age of 100. His death created a new problem. No one wanted his body. Argentina refused to allow his burial there. His hometown in Germany also refused. The Catholic Church in Rome refused to allow any church in its diocese to hold a funeral service for him. A fringe traditionalist Catholic group eventually agreed to hold a small service, but it was met with large protests. To avoid unrest and the creation of a site for Nazi sympathizers, the Italian authorities took control of his body. He was buried in a secret, unmarked location. His story ended with his crimes permanently recorded by history, his name forever tied to the massacre, and his body denied a public gravesite by the world. Story 3. Oscar Paul Dirlewanger was born on September 26, 1895, in the city of Würzburg, Germany. He was the second child of August and Pauline Dirlewanger. His father worked as a lawyer and a merchant. The family was middle class and respectable. Oscar had an older sister named Mathilde and a younger sister named Elfriede. A younger brother named Paul was born later. When Oscar was about 6 years old, his father changed his job. This required the family to move to the city of Stuttgart. Oscar began his elementary education there. A few years later, the family moved again, this time to the town of Esslingen am Neckar. Oscar continued his schooling at the local gymnasium, which is a type of secondary school that prepares students for university. His school records show he was an average student. He was not the best, but he was not the worst in his class. In the summer of 1913, Oscar finished his final school examinations. He passed. His grades were mixed. He was very good in history and literature, good in geography, but only adequate in subjects like geometry and English. On his school leaving certificate, he wrote that he planned to study law and become an administrative lawyer. This showed a desire for a stable, professional career. Instead of going to university right away, Oscar decided to join the army. On October 1, 1913, he enlisted in the Württemberg Army as a one-year volunteer. He was assigned to a grenadier regiment as a machine gunner. This was a common path for young men from his background at the time. He was in the army when World War I began in August 1914. Dirlewanger's unit was sent to fight on the Western Front in France. He saw combat very quickly. He was wounded several times in the first months of the war. He was shot and also hit with shrapnel. For his service, he was awarded the Iron Cross, a medal for bravery. He was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. He continued to fight and was wounded again later in the war. By the end of the war in 1918, he was a senior lieutenant and had command of a company. His military record from this time was considered very good. When the war ended, Dirlewanger led his men back to Germany from Romania. The country he returned to was very different. It was now the Weimar Republic, and there was a lot of political fighting and unrest. Many former soldiers had trouble adjusting to peaceful life. Dirlewanger joined various freelance military groups called Freikorps. These groups fought against communist uprisings inside Germany. He commanded an armored train and was involved in suppressing strikes and revolts in several German towns. During periods when he was not involved with the Freikorps, Dirlewanger went to university. He studied at the Goethe University Frankfurt. In 1922, he earned a doctorate in political science. His thesis was about the management of the economy. Now he was Dr. Oscar Dirlewanger. In 1923, he joined the Nazi Party, NSDAP, and its paramilitary wing, the SA. His party membership lapsed for a time, but he rejoined in 1926. He worked different jobs, including at a bank and at a textile factory owned by a Jewish family. He left the Nazi Party again during this period, likely because his employer was Jewish. He rejoined the party for a third time in 1932. After the Nazis took power in Germany in 1933, Dirlewanger was given a government job as the deputy director of a state employment office in the city of Heilbronn. This was a good position. However, in 1934, his life took a sharp turn. He was arrested, put on trial, and found guilty of a serious crime. The court said he had a sexual relationship with a member of the League of German Girls, who was a minor at the time. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He also lost his job, his doctorate title, and his membership in the Nazi Party. He served his sentence in a prison in Ludwigsburg. After he was released from prison, he was in a difficult situation. He was a convicted criminal and had no job. An old army friend from the Free Corps, Gottlieb Berger, who was now a high-ranking SS officer, decided to help him. Berger arranged for Dirlewanger to leave Germany. Dirlewanger went to Spain, which was in the middle of a civil war. He joined the Spanish Foreign Legion and later served with the German Condor Legion, a unit sent to help the Spanish nationalist forces. He served there from 1937 to 1939 and was wounded several times. His military commanders in Spain wrote positive reports about his service. When he returned to Germany in 1939, the world was on the brink of another world war. When Oskar Dirlewanger returned to Germany from Spain in 1939, World War II began. His friend, SS officer Gottlieb Berger, worked to get him into the Waffen-SS, the military wing of the SS. Berger had an idea. The SS had a group of prisoners at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp who were convicted poachers. Berger suggested that Dirlewanger could be the commander to train these men for military service. The head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, agreed. In June 1940, Dirlewanger was allowed to join the Waffen-SS as a lieutenant. His first task was to form and lead this special unit of convicts. It was first called the Wilddieb Kommando Oranienburg, Poacher Commando Oranienburg, and later became known as the SS Sonderkommando Dirlewanger. The unit started with poachers, but soon began accepting other types of criminals from prisons and concentration camps. In September 1940, Dirlewanger and his unit were sent to the area of Lublin in occupied Poland. Their job was security and fighting against Polish resistance. They also guarded Jewish labor camps. Dirlewanger was personally in charge of the camp at Stary Zicko. During this time, he and his men began to commit terrible acts. They robbed from the local population. Dirlewanger himself was accused of stealing from the Jewish ghetto in Lublin. He was also accused of sexual violence. A later SS judge reported that Dirlewanger abused women and girls. The report stated he would whip them and burn them with a lighter. He was also accused of injecting poison into Jewish girls and watching them die. In 1941, an SS judge named George Conrad Morgan started an investigation into Dirlewanger's actions. The judge gathered evidence of murder, theft, and what the Nazis called race defilement because Dirlewanger had a relationship with a Jewish woman. The judge asked a senior SS commander in Poland for permission to arrest Dirlewanger. However, Dirlewanger's protector, Gottlieb Berger, stopped the arrest. Berger used his influence to protect Dirlewanger, and the investigation was closed. No action was taken against him. In early 1942, Dirlewanger's unit was moved to Belarus. Their new official task was Bandenbekämpfung, which meant fighting against Soviet partisans hiding in the forests. In reality, their job was to terrorize the local population. The unit would surround entire villages. They would force all the people into a large barn, lock the doors, set the barn on fire, and then shoot with machine guns anyone who tried to escape. They used civilians as human shields and forced them to walk across minefields to clear a path for the soldiers. They called this a Dirlewanger mine detector. The unit also participated in the Holocaust. In one operation in September 1942, they helped kill over 8,000 Jewish men, women, and children in the Baranovichi ghetto. After that, they reported killing hundreds of bandits and suspects in the surrounding countryside. A German civilian administrator in Belarus, Wilhelm Kuba, wrote a letter of complaint to his superiors in 1943. He said Dirlewanger's brutal methods, which he compared to the violence of the 30 Years' War, were making it impossible for the German administration to win the trust of the local people. Despite this complaint, no action was taken against Dirlewanger. In the summer of 1944, the Soviet army advanced into Poland. The Polish resistance in Warsaw started an uprising to liberate the city. Dirlewanger's unit, now called a regiment, was sent to Warsaw in early August to help crush the uprising. In Warsaw, Dirlewanger and his men committed their worst atrocities. They were part of a force under SS General Heinz Reinfarth. Their orders were to crush the rebellion without mercy. In the first days, they systematically killed tens of thousands of civilians in the Wala district. They went from house to house, ordering people out, and then shooting them in large groups. Dirlewanger's men set hospitals on fire with patients and doctors inside. They raped nurses and then hanged them. They killed children. A Belgian man serving as a German army engineer witnessed Dirlewanger take a small child from its mother, throw the child into a fire, and then shoot the mother. The violence was not only against Poles. Dirlewanger was also brutal to his own soldiers. He beat them and executed them for small reasons. He used a punishment called the Dirlewanger coffin, where a man was locked in a tiny box for days. The unit's behavior was so shocking that other German commanders complained. The regular German army commander in Warsaw, and even the SS commander in charge, Erich von dem Boxeluski, asked for Dirlewanger to be removed. They described him and his men as criminals and hoodlums. However, because of Berger's protection, Dirlewanger was not removed. Instead, he was promoted and awarded one of Germany's highest military medals, the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, for his actions in Warsaw. After Warsaw, his unit was sent to Slovakia to help put down another uprising there in October 1944. They committed similar acts of looting and violence. Finally, in late 1944, the unit was sent to the front line in Hungary to fight the Soviet army. In February 1945, Dirlewanger was seriously wounded in battle near the German town of Guben. This was his 12th combat wound. He was sent to a hospital away from the front. Without him, his unit, now called a division, fell apart. In April 1945, as the war was ending, Dirlewanger left the hospital. He did not return to his unit. He changed into civilian clothes and went into hiding. After deserting in April 1945, Oskar Dirlewanger hid in a remote hunting lodge near the town of Altshausen in southern Germany. He wore civilian clothes and used a false name. On June 1, 1945, French soldiers from an occupation unit arrested him. He was recognized by a former Polish prisoner who had been held in one of the camps Dirlewanger once commanded. The prisoner pointed him out to the French authorities. Dirlewanger was taken to a prison camp run by the French in Altshausen. A few days later, on or around June 7, 1945, he died in the camp. The French military authorities officially stated that he died of a heart attack, which they called vascular collapse. However, other reports from people at the time said he was beaten to death by his Polish guards. These guards were either former prisoners of war or forced laborers who had been freed and were now working for the French. The exact details of his death were not fully investigated at the time. He was buried in an unmarked grave in the Altshausen cemetery. After the war, many major Nazi war criminals were put on trial in Nuremberg. However, because Dirlewanger was already dead, he was never formally tried in a court of law for his actions in Poland and Belarus. His superior and protector, Gottlieb Berger, was tried and sentenced to 25 years in prison, but his sentence was later reduced. In the years following the war, rumors began to spread. Some people claimed that Oskar Dirlewanger had not died in 1945. They said he had escaped and fled to Egypt or other countries. These rumors persisted for over a decade. Because of this, the mayor of Altshausen and a journalist pressured authorities to find out the truth. In 1960, a German public prosecutor ordered the exhumation of the body from the unmarked grave in Altshausen. Forensic scientists examined the skeleton. They used several key pieces of information to identify it. First, they knew Dirlewanger had gold dental work. His former dentist provided records of this. Second, they had a detailed list of his many war wounds, including a damaged bone in his left hand from a World War I injury, an old bullet wound in his right foot, and a skull injury from 1921. The scientific examination took about 3 weeks. The forensic pathologists matched the skeleton's injuries and dental work perfectly with Dirlewanger's known medical history. They concluded with certainty that the remains were his. This officially proved that Oscar Dirlewanger had died in the French camp in June 1945. The rumors of his escape were false. Historians later gathered evidence of his unit's actions from survivor accounts, German military documents, and the reports of other Nazi officials who had complained about him. Through this research, the full scale of the crimes committed under his command became clear. He was held responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of civilians in Belarus and Poland. The unit he led is considered one of the most brutal and criminal military formations of World War II. Because he died before facing a court, Oscar Dirlewanger never received legal punishment for his crimes. Historical records and the memories of survivors are the only testament to his actions. His confirmed death in 1945 brought a conclusive end to his life. The story of his crimes, his protection by powerful figures, and his eventual death while in custody closes the account of one of history's most notorious war criminals. Story 4. Ilse Kohler was born on September 22, 1906, in the city of Dresden, Germany. Her father, Max Kohler, was a factory worker. Her mother, Anna Kohler, took care of the home. Ilse had 2 brothers. The family was lower middle class and Protestant. They did not have a lot of money, but they were not extremely poor. Ilse attended the local German schools that all children were required to go to. She was an average student. After finishing her basic schooling, she went to a trade school. At the trade school, she learned secretarial skills. These skills included typing, filing, and office organization. This was a common path for young women at the time to get a job. In the late 1920s, Ilse began working as a secretary. She worked for several different companies in Dresden. This was a period of great difficulty in Germany. The country had lost World War I and was suffering from a very bad economy. Many people were poor and unemployed. Political groups argued and fought in the streets. During this time, Ilse began to spend more time in social circles with members of a new political group called the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party promised to make Germany strong and prosperous again. In 1932, Ilse decided to join the Nazi Party herself. Being a member gave her a sense of belonging and purpose. Through her social activities with the Nazi Party's paramilitary wing, the SS, she met a man named Karl Otto Koch in 1934. Karl was a dedicated and rising member of the SS. He was several years older than Ilse. They began a romantic relationship. Karl's career within the SS was very important to him. In 1936, Karl Koch was appointed as the commandant, or head, of Sachsenhausen concentration camp. This was a camp where the Nazi regime sent people it considered enemies. Ilse moved to be near him at the camp. To get married in the SS, they needed permission. They had to prove they were of pure Aryan blood, meaning they had no Jewish ancestry. Ilse provided documents about her family history. The SS office approved their marriage. Ilse and Karl were married in a ceremony at Sachsenhausen concentration camp in 1937. Later that same year, Karl was given a new job. He was ordered to set up and become the first commandant of a new, larger camp called Buchenwald. Ilse moved with him. The couple lived in a large, specially built villa inside the Buchenwald campgrounds. The house had 3 stories and was very comfortable. It was separated from the prisoner barracks by a garden and a wall, but it was inside the camp fence. From their windows, they could see parts of the camp. Ilse and Karl started a family. Their first son, Artwin, was born in 1938. A daughter, Gisela, was born in 1939. Another daughter, Gudrun, was born in 1940. All the children were born in the villa at Buchenwald. Ilse's life revolved around managing her household, caring for her children, and hosting social events for her husband's SS colleagues. She enjoyed the status and power that came with being the commandant's wife. She had servants, who were prisoners forced to work for her. Ilse Koch lived this life at Buchenwald for several years. She was known to the prisoners, who could sometimes see her in her garden or walking near the camp buildings. She was a visible part of the camp's administration. Life inside the camp for Ilse Koch continued as normal for her family, but her position as the commandant's wife allowed her to act with great cruelty. She did not have an official job or title, but she used her husband's authority to get what she wanted. She often walked around the camp areas with a large dog. One of her main activities was using prisoner labor for her own benefit. She would order prisoners who were craftsmen, like carpenters or tailors, to work for her. They were forced to make fine furniture, repair clothes, or create toys for her children. This work was done without pay, under threat of punishment. The prisoners had to do this on top of their other hard labor in the camp. Ilse Koch also had a passion for horseback riding. In 1940, she wanted an indoor riding arena built for her personal use. Her husband approved the project. Prisoners from the camp were forced to build it. The construction was very expensive and used materials meant for other purposes. The work was brutal. Prisoners were beaten by guards to work faster. Several prisoners died from exhaustion, accidents, or beatings during the construction of this arena. Her violence was not only through giving orders. Witnesses later stated that she personally assaulted prisoners. If a prisoner looked at her, or if she felt disrespected, she would sometimes hit them with her riding whip. On other occasions, she would report a prisoner to the camp's SS guards for a beating. She would claim the prisoner had been rude or had stolen something. The SS guards would then brutally beat the reported prisoner. In at least one case, a prisoner died from such a beating after Ilse Koch had reported him. A specific pattern of behavior involved tattoos. Ilse Koch was known to visit the camp prison yard and the infirmary. She would sometimes notice prisoners who had interesting tattoos on their skin. She would point at these prisoners and make comments. Later, those specific prisoners would be taken from the general camp population and killed by injection or sent to the camp's clinic. The skin with the tattoos was then removed from the bodies after death. This was done by order of the camp's SS doctors, who were conducting their own experiments. While Ilse Koch did not personally remove the skin, her selection of tattooed prisoners led to their deaths so their skin could be taken. The removed skin was treated and prepared. Some of it was made into small items like book covers, lampshades, or gloves. These items were then shown off as curiosities. Ilse Koch was known to have some of these items in her home. She showed them to guests as strange souvenirs made from human skin. In 1941, her personal life suffered a tragedy when her infant daughter Gudrun died of illness. However, her behavior in the camp did not change. She continued her routine of using prisoners, demanding services, and acting with violence. The prisoners in the camp began to call her the Witch of Buchenwald because of her cruelty and because she seemed to have power over life and death. In 1943, her husband Karl was transferred to another camp due to an investigation into corruption. Ilse stayed at the Buchenwald villa with her children for a short time. Later that year, however, She and her husband were both arrested by the SS' own internal police. They were accused of stealing money and property from the camp for their personal use. This was a crime within the SS system. Ilse was put in a Gestapo prison in a nearby city. She was released in 1944 after an SS court found her not guilty of the corruption charges. Her husband was found guilty and was executed by the SS in April 1945, just before the war ended. After her release, Ilse Koch moved with her 2 remaining children to a small apartment in the town of Ludwigsburg. She tried to live a quiet, anonymous life as the war was ending. Ilse Koch's attempt to hide failed in June 1945, and former prisoner from Buchenwald recognized her on a street in Ludwigsburg. The prisoner immediately reported her to the American occupation authorities who controlled the area. American soldiers arrested her at her apartment. She was taken into custody because of her association with the Buchenwald camp. The American military decided to put her on trial as a war criminal. She was transferred to a prison to await trial. During this time, she became pregnant. The father was another German man held in the same prison complex. She gave birth to a son in October 1947 while she was in custody. Her trial began in 1947, held by an American military court at Dachau. She was tried alongside 30 other people who had worked at Buchenwald. The charge was participating in a common plan to commit war crimes. During the trial, former prisoners testified against her. They spoke about her beatings, how she reported prisoners for severe punishments, and about the construction of the riding arena that led to deaths. Witnesses also spoke about the tattooed skins and the items made from them, linking her to this practice by stating she selected prisoners. Based on this testimony, the court found Ilse Koch guilty. The judges sentenced her to life in prison. She avoided a possible death sentence because she was pregnant and had recently given birth. After the trial, the sentence went through a review process by American Army lawyers. These lawyers examined the trial record. They concluded that the most shocking claim, that she ordered killings to get tattooed skin for lampshades, was not strongly proven in court. They noted the evidence for this was based on rumors and weak testimony. They found stronger evidence for her smaller acts of cruelty, like beatings. Because of this, the reviewing lawyers recommended her sentence be reduced. In 1948, General Lucius Clay, the senior American official in Germany, reduced her sentence to just 4 years. He stated the evidence for the most serious crimes was not convincing. This decision caused a major public outcry in the United States. Newspapers criticized the reduction. Protests were held. American senators launched an investigation. The Senate committee listened to the trial prosecutors, who argued the original life sentence was correct. The committee decided that Ilse Koch should be tried again, but by a German court for crimes against German citizens. The American court had only tried her for crimes against Allied nationals. Pressure was applied to the new West German government to put her on trial. Ilse Koch was released from the American prison in 1949 after serving her reduced sentence. West German authorities immediately rearrested her on the street outside the prison gates. She was charged with incitement to murder and incitement to grievous bodily harm against German nationals at Buchenwald. Her new trial began in Augsburg, West Germany, in late 1950. This trial heard from over 250 witnesses. Former German prisoners from Buchenwald gave detailed accounts. They testified that Ilse Koch had specifically pointed out prisoners to SS guards, leading directly to those prisoners being beaten or killed. The evidence was focused on her personal actions that caused harm, not on the broader system of the camp. The court did not include the lampshade charges, as they still could not find solid proof. On January 15, 1951, the court found Ilse Koch guilty of multiple counts of incitement to murder and incitement to grievous bodily harm. The judge stated she had suppressed any natural pity she should have had as a woman and abused her power. She was sentenced to life imprisonment for a second time, and this time her civil rights were permanently removed. All her appeals were rejected. She served her sentence in a women's prison in Achak. Over the years, her mental health declined. She became paranoid, fearing that concentration camp survivors would find and attack her in her cell. On September 1st, 1967, she used a bed sheet to hang herself in her prison cell. She was 60 years old. In a suicide note to her youngest son, she wrote that death was a release for her. Her son later tried, without success, to clear her name after her death. Story 5. Klaus Barbie was born on October 25, 1913, in a small town named Godesberg in Germany. This town later became part of the city of Bonn. His family originally came from a place called Merzig, which was near the French border. His father was also named Klaus Barbie. In 1914, the First World War began. Klaus Barbie's father was taken into the army to fight. He was sent to a famous battle at Verdun. There, he was hurt in the neck and captured by French soldiers. He never became fully healthy again after this. Until he was 10 years old, Klaus attended the local school in his town. His father was a teacher at this school. In 1923, Klaus was sent to a boarding school in a city called Trier. A boarding school is a school where students live and sleep. In 1925, his whole family moved to the city of Trier to live together. Life changed for Klaus in 1933. First, his younger brother, Kurt, died. Kurt was 18 and had been sick for a long time. Later that same year, Klaus's father also died. Klaus was 20 years old when his father died. Before his father's death, Klaus had planned to study religion or theology. After his father died, those plans stopped. Klaus did not have a job. During this time, the German government required all young men to join the Reich Labor Service. This was a program where men did public work projects. Klaus had to join this service. On September 26, 1935, Klaus Barbie joined a powerful group called the Schutzstaffel, known as the SS. He was 22 years old. The SS was a major military and police group in Nazi Germany. He was given the membership number 272,284. He began working for the Sicherheitsdienst, or SD. The SD was the intelligence and security service of the SS. Its job was to gather information and watch enemies of the Nazi Party. On May 1, 1937, Klaus Barbie also became an official member of the Nazi Party itself. His party membership number was 4,583,085. In April 1939, when he was 25, he became engaged to a woman named Regina Margareta Wilms. She was 23, and her father worked for the Postal Service. They would later have 2 children together. After joining the Nazi Party and the SS, Klaus Barbie was given work. His first major assignment was in the Netherlands after the German army conquered it. He worked for a department called AMT 4B4. This department was led by Adolf Eichmann. Its job was to find and arrest certain groups of people. These groups included communists, Jewish people, and Freemasons. They were then sent away to camps. On October 11, 1940, Barbie arrested a man named Hermanus van Tongeren. Van Tongeren was the leader of a Dutch Freemason group. In March 1941, Van Tongeren was sent to a concentration camp called Sachsenhausen. The conditions there were very bad and very cold. He died 2 weeks after arriving. Later, Barbie told Van Tongeren's daughter that her father died from an ear infection and had been cremated. In 1942, Barbie was sent to France. He first worked in the city of Dijon, in the part of France controlled by Germany. Then, in November 1942, he was given a more important job. he was sent to the city of Lyon. He was 29 years old. In Lyon, he was made the head of the local Gestapo. The Gestapo was the secret police of Nazi Germany. Barbie set up his office in the Hotel Terminus in Lyon. From this place, he led actions against people who opposed the Nazis. These people were called the French Resistance. He also focused on Jewish people living in the area. Barbie personally questioned prisoners. During these questioning sessions, he used violence to get information. This violence is called torture. He tortured both adults and children. One method he used was beating people. He also used buckets of very cold water and ammonia. He would put people's heads into these buckets. Another method involved using dogs. He trained German Shepherd dogs to attack and bite prisoners. He also used these dogs to hurt naked women prisoners. He was directly involved in organizing large arrests. One of these was called the Rue St. Catherine Roundup. In this event, 84 people were arrested in one day. They were Jewish men, women, and children. They were later sent to death camps. It is estimated that Barbie was responsible for sending as many as 14,000 people away. Most were Jewish people or resistance fighters. These people were sent on trains to concentration camps and death camps in Eastern Europe. His most famous prisoner was a man named Jean Moulin. Moulin was a very high-ranking leader of the French resistance. Barbie captured him in 1943. After his capture, Moulin was tortured. He died from the injuries he suffered during this torture. For capturing Jean Moulin, Barbie was given a medal by Adolf Hitler. The medal was called the Iron Cross, First Class. In April 1944, Barbie ordered another specific action. He sent a group of 44 Jewish children to their deaths. The children were living in a safe home for orphans in a village called a zoo. Barbie ordered their arrest. They were put on trains and sent to the Auschwitz death camp. None of these children survived. As the war was ending in 1944, the German forces retreated from Lyon. Barbie went with them. He continued to lead attacks against French resistance fighters in other areas until the war in Europe ended in May 1945. After World War II ended in 1945, Klaus Barbie was wanted for his crimes in Lyon. The French government sentenced him to death for his war crimes in 1947 and again in 1954, but he was not in France to be arrested. He had disappeared. Unknown to the French authorities at the time, American intelligence officers had found Barbie in Europe after the war. The United States was starting a new conflict called the Cold War against the Soviet Union and communism. The U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Corps, CIC, decided Barbie could be useful. They hired him as an agent because he knew about communist activities and had experience in intelligence work. They gave him money and a place to live in Germany. When the French government learned Barbie was working for the Americans and asked for his arrest, U.S. officials refused to hand him over. They worried he would reveal their other secret operations. To avoid more problems, the CIC helped Barbie escape from Europe. They used a secret network called a Ratlin. This network was often run by sympathetic individuals, including some Catholic clergy. In 1951, with false papers under the name Klaus Altmann, Barbie and his family sailed to South America. They eventually settled in Bolivia. In Bolivia, Barbie lived openly as Klaus Altmann. He became a businessman and made friends with powerful people in the Bolivian military and government. He used his police experience to advise the Bolivian army. He taught them interrogation methods, which included torture. He helped several military dictators in Bolivia who were fighting against left-wing political groups. During this time, he also got involved in illegal activities like weapons trading. For many years, it seemed Barbie had escaped justice. Then, in 1971, two Nazi hunters named Serge and Beat Klarsfeld discovered his location. The Klarsfelds were a French couple who dedicated their lives to finding Nazis who had escaped. They found a document that revealed Klaus Altmann in Bolivia was actually Klaus Barbie. They told the world by publishing the information in a French newspaper. In early 1972, a French journalist named Ladislas de Hoyos went to Bolivia to find Barbie. He pretended to want an interview with Klaus Altman, the businessman. During the interview, which was filmed, the journalist suddenly asked a question in French. He asked if Barbie had ever been to Lyon. Barbie, surprised, answered no in German. This was a mistake because Klaus Altman was not supposed to speak German. The journalist also showed him photos of resistance members he had tortured. Barbie denied knowing them, but his fingerprints on the photos matched old Gestapo records. When the interview was shown on French television, a woman named Simone Lagrange saw it. She was a survivor of the Gestapo prison in Lyon and recognized Barbie immediately as the man who had tortured her. Now the whole world knew where Barbie was, but the Bolivian government, which was a dictatorship, protected him. They refused to send him to France. He continued to live freely in Bolivia for another decade. He even worked for West German intelligence during this time, sending them reports. The situation changed in 1982. Bolivia's government became a democracy after elections. The new president, Hernán Siles Zuazo, did not want to protect a Nazi war criminal. In February 1983, the Bolivian police arrested Barbie. The official reason was a small debt he owed to the state, but the real reason was to prepare his extradition. A few days later, they put him on a military airplane and sent him to France. In France, Barbie was put on trial for crimes against humanity. This trial was different from his earlier death sentences. France had abolished the death penalty in 1981, so the worst punishment he could now receive was life in prison. The trial began in Lyon in May 1987. Many survivors came to court to tell their stories. They described the torture and the roundups, including the children from a zoo. Barbie's lawyer tried a new strategy. He did not deny the facts. Instead, he argued that other nations, including France, had also committed terrible acts in their colonies. He said Barbie was being judged unfairly. The court did not accept this argument. After a long trial, on July 4, 1987, the judges and jury found Klaus Barbie guilty of crimes against humanity. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. Klaus Barbie was sent to Lyon's St. Paul prison. He died there of cancer on September 25, 1991, at the age of 77. His ashes were taken out of France by his family. The long search for justice was finally over. Story 6. Alois Brunner was born on April 8, 1912, in a small town named Vas. This town was then part of the Empire of Austria-Hungary. After the war, this region became part of the country of Austria. His father was a farmer named Joseph Brunner. His mother was named in Cruz. He grew up in a rural area. Not much is recorded about his childhood or his school years. As a young man, he learned a trade. He became a grocer's apprentice. This means he worked in a shop to learn how to run a food business. When he was a teenager, he became involved in politics. In 1931, when he was 19 years old, he joined a political group called the Nazi Party. This was a radical group in Germany that believed in extreme nationalism and racial purity. A year later, in 1932, he joined the party's paramilitary wing, called the Sturmabteilung, or SA. The SA was known for its violent street fights against political opponents. In 1933, the Nazi Party took full control in Germany. That same year, Brunner moved from Austria to Germany. He joined a group called the Austrian Legion. This was a paramilitary group made up of Austrian Nazis living in Germany. In 1938, Germany annexed Austria. This event is called the Anschluss. It meant Austria was made a part of Nazi Germany. After this happened, Brunner volunteered for the Schutzstaffel, commonly known as the SS. The SS was the elite guard of the Nazi Party and later carried out many of its most terrible acts. Because of his early membership in the Nazi Party, Brunner was given a job. He was assigned to work in an office in Vienna called the Central Office for Jewish Emigration. This office was led by Adolf Eichmann. Its job was to force Jewish people to leave the country and to take their property and money from them. Brunner learned how this office worked. He was eager and efficient in his duties. In 1939, because of his efficiency, he was made the director of this office in Vienna. His job was to organize and speed up the process of forcing Jews out of Austria. Later in 1939, after Germany took control of parts of Czechoslovakia, he was sent there. His task was the same, to apply his methods to force Czech Jews to emigrate. During this early part of the war, he worked closely with Adolf Eichmann on a plan called the Nisko Plan. The goal of this plan was to send tens of thousands of Jewish people to a reservation area in Poland. The plan ultimately failed. But through this work, Brunner became known as Eichmann's most trusted assistant. After the Nisko Plan failed, Alois Brunner continued his work in Vienna. His method was systematic. He used lists of names and addresses to find Jewish people. His office would summon them, confiscate all their valuables and property, and then issue them papers to leave the country. However, leaving often meant being put on trains to ghettos or camps in occupied Poland. By October 1939, he had organized the deportation of over 1,500 Viennese Jews to Nisko. Over the following years, he would oversee the deportation of tens of thousands more from Austria. In 1942, his success led to a transfer to Berlin. From there, he was sent to Thessaloniki in Greece in February 1943. Greece was occupied by German forces. Brunner's task was to organize the deportation of the entire Jewish community from the city. He set up a transit camp outside the city. He forced all Jewish people from their homes and into this camp. He worked quickly. In just 2 months, from March to August 1943, he deported approximately 43,000 Jewish men, women, and children. They were put on crowded freight trains. These trains traveled for many days to Auschwitz-Birkenau extermination camp in occupied Poland. Almost all of the people on these trains were killed soon after they arrived. Because of his efficiency, Brunner was given a more important command. In June 1943, he was made the commander of the Drancy internment camp. This camp was outside Paris, in France. France was partially occupied by Germany. Drancy was not a death camp. It was a transit camp. People were held there temporarily before being sent east to extermination camps. Brunner made the camp much more severe. He introduced a strict system to categorize prisoners. He personally interrogated new arrivals. During these interrogations, he was violent. Survivors later said his office had bloodstains and bullet holes in the walls. He tortured prisoners for even small rule violations. He was directly responsible to Adolf Eichmann in Berlin, so he did not have to listen to other local German commanders. He also expanded who could be deported. Before he arrived, some Jews with French citizenship were sometimes spared. Brunner ended this. He ordered roundups of all Jews, including French citizens, including women and children. He lied to the people being deported. He told them they were being sent to work camps in the East with good conditions. He knew they were being sent to Auschwitz to be killed. As the Allied armies advanced through France in the summer of 1944, Brunner intensified his efforts. He wanted to deport as many people as possible before the camp was liberated. Between July 20th and July 24th, 1944, he had 1,327 Jewish children arrested in Paris and sent to Drancy. They were then immediately put on trains to Auschwitz. Brunner himself left Drancy on August 17th, 1944, just 1 week before Paris was freed. He left on the last train from the camp. He took 51 Jewish deportees with him. His plan was to use them as hostages for his own safety. In total, as commander of Drancy, he deported nearly 24,000 people to their deaths. His final assignment began in September 1944. He was sent to Slovakia. Slovakia was a country allied with Germany. Brunner's job was to destroy the remaining Jewish community there. He took command of the Seared concentration camp. He hunted down Jews who were hiding or were with the underground resistance. From this camp, he organized trains to Auschwitz and other camps. He deported around 13,500 people from Slovakia. This included almost all of the last Jewish children in the country. None of the children deported from Slovakia during this time are known to have survived. After World War II ended in 1945, Alois Brunner used the chaos to hide. He was captured by Allied forces, but they did not know who he was. His identity was confused with another Nazi named Anton Brunner. Anton Brunner was executed for war crimes in Austria in 1946. Because of the same last name, many authorities believed Alois Brunner was already dead. This mistake helped him. He obtained false papers under a different name. Using these papers, he found work as a truck driver for the United States Army in occupied Germany. For several years, he lived openly in Germany without being recognized. Nazi hunters, who were people dedicated to finding war criminals, did not yet know he was alive. In the early 1950s, survivors of the Drancy camp and other places began to speak about the brutal SS commander named Brunner. Nazi hunters like Simon Wiesenthal started to collect evidence. They realized the executed Anton Brunner was a different person. They understood that Alois Brunner, Eichmann's assistant, was still free. By this time, Brunner knew investigators were closing in. In 1954, he fled West Germany using a fake passport from the Red Cross. He went first to Rome, then to Egypt. In Egypt, he worked with other former Nazis as a weapons dealer. He did not stay long. By 1955, he had moved to Syria, a country in the Middle East. He entered Syria using the alias Dr. George Fisher. The Syrian government at that time gave him asylum, which means they protected him and let him live there. Meanwhile, the justice system was moving slowly. Because he could not be found, he was tried in his absence. This is called a trial in absentia. In 1954, a French court found him guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced him to death. Since he was not there, the sentence could not be carried out. For decades, Nazi hunters and governments tried to find him and get him out of Syria. Simon Wiesenthal and a French lawyer named Serge Klarsfeld led this effort. Klarsfeld's own father had been a victim deported by Brunner. They tracked sightings and gathered information. They proved he was living in Damascus, the capital of Syria. They gave this information to the French and German governments. The Syrian government refused all requests to arrest him or send him to Europe. They refused entry to investigators. It is believed Brunner helped the Syrian secret police by teaching them interrogation and torture methods he used during the war. This may be why Syria protected him. Several attempts were made to kill him. In 1961, he received a letter bomb. It exploded when he opened it, and he lost his left eye. In 1980, he opened another parcel bomb. This one blew off the fingers on his left hand. These bombs were sent by Israeli intelligence agencies. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, legal efforts continued. An international arrest warrant, called an Interpol Red Notice, was issued for him in 1987. In 1995, German prosecutors offered a large reward for information leading to his capture. In 2001, another French trial in absentia found him guilty for the deportation of 345 Jewish children from Paris and sentenced him to life in prison. This was a symbolic act to remember the victims. The search continued, but became more difficult. The last confirmed sighting by journalists was in Damascus in 2001. He was very old and in poor health. For years, his fate was unknown. Some reports said he died in 1996, others in 2001, and others in 2010. In 2014, the Simon Wiesenthal Center announced it had received credible information from a former German intelligence agent. The information stated Brunner had died in Syria around 2010. A later investigation in 2017 by journalists spoke to his former guards in Syria. They said he had been kept under house arrest in a basement in Damascus by the Syrian government for years. They stated he died in December 2001, was washed according to Muslim rites, and was buried secretly at night in a Damascus cemetery called Al-Afif. Alois Brunner never stood in a courtroom, never apologized, and never faced justice from the society he wronged. He died a free man, protected by a foreign government, while his victims and their families received no final accountability for his crimes. Story 7. Aribert Heim was born on June 28, 1914, in a small town called Bad Radkersburg. This town was part of the Empire of Austria-Hungary. His father worked as a policeman. His mother stayed at home to care for the family. They were a normal family for that time and place. Heim grew up and went to school in the city of Graz. He was a good student. After finishing school, he decided to study medicine. He moved to the city of Vienna to go to the university there. In 1940, he successfully finished his studies. He became a doctor of medicine. This was a proud achievement for him and his family. In April of that same year, 1940, Heim made a choice. He volunteered to join the Waffen-SS. The Waffen-SS was the military part of the Nazi Party's SS organization. He was not forced to join. He joined by his own decision. Because he was an educated doctor, he was given the rank of an officer. His rank was Hauptsturmführer, which is like a captain in an army. After his training, the SS assigned Heim to work as a doctor. His first jobs were in field hospitals and with combat units. He did normal medical work for soldiers. He built a career as an SS doctor. He was seen as a reliable and professional man in his field. During this early part of his career, he also got married. His wife's name was Friedel. Together, they would later have 2 sons. He started a family while continuing his work as a doctor within the SS structure. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, the Nazi regime built camps for prisoners. These were called concentration camps. In 1941, the SS needed more doctors to work in these camps. The SS doctors were assigned to different camps to provide medical services. It was a job assignment from his superiors. Heim's life, up to this point, followed a clear path. He was born into an ordinary family. He studied hard and became a doctor. He chose to join the SS and became an officer. He got married. He followed the orders he was given for his postings. He was a man with medical skills, working within a powerful and strict organization. In October 1941, Aribert Heim received new orders from the SS. He was assigned to work as a camp doctor at the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria. He was 27 years old. His job was to provide medical care in the camp. But at Mauthausen, the idea of medical care was twisted. The camp was a place designed for hard labor and death. The SS doctors there often used their skills not to heal, but to punish and kill. Heim began his work. He worked closely with another SS man, a pharmacist named Erich Wazicki. Together, they started to perform actions on prisoners that were not medicine. They used prisoners for experiments. One of their experiments involved injections. They would inject different liquids directly into the hearts of living prisoners. They wanted to see which liquid would cause death the fastest. They injected things like gasoline, phenol, a poisonous chemical, and even plain water. The prisoners chosen for these experiments were often Jewish. They died in great pain from these injections. Heim also performed surgeries without using any anesthesia. Anesthesia is a drug that puts patients to sleep or numbs pain during an operation. He did not use it. He would operate on conscious prisoners who could feel everything. Witnesses said he would remove organs from living prisoners during these operations. For example, he would take out a person's kidney or liver while they were awake. The prisoners would die from these brutal surgeries. There was one particular young prisoner. He was only 18 years old. He came to the camp hospital because he had an infected foot. Heim decided to operate on him. He gave the boy an anesthetic this time, which put him to sleep. But then Heim did a terrible series of actions. He cut the boy open. He removed one of the boy's kidneys. He also castrated the boy. The young prisoner died on the operating table. After the boy died, Heim cut off his head. He ordered someone to boil the head to remove the skin and flesh from the skull. He then kept the clean skull on his desk in his office. He used it as a paperweight. A witness later said Heim wanted the skull because the boy had perfect teeth. Heim did other cruel things. He would sometimes take blood from healthy prisoners, draining large amounts from them. He also took skin from prisoners. Witnesses reported that he cut off tattooed skin from dead prisoners. He then had this skin treated and turned into leather. He made items like seat covers from this human skin. He gave these items as gifts to other SS officers, including the camp commander. The prisoners in the camp quickly learned to fear Dr. Heim. They gave him nicknames. They called him Dr. Death. They also called him the Butcher of Mauthausen. His actions were not secret in the camp. Other SS guards and workers saw what he did. The prisoners saw what happened to those who were sent to him. For about 6 weeks, Heim carried out these acts at the main Mauthausen camp. Then, in late 1941, he was sent to work at a sub-camp of Mauthausen called Ebensee. He worked there for about 2 months. At Ebensee, he continued the same kind of experiments and brutal surgeries on prisoners. He was still searching for fast ways to kill people through injections. In February 1942, his time working in the concentration camp system ended. He received new orders. He was transferred away from Mauthausen and Ebensee. He was sent to work as a doctor for an SS Mountain Division fighting in Finland. His role returned to being a normal military doctor for soldiers. He left the camp behind, but the crimes he committed there were witnessed and remembered by the survivors. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. In March of that year, before the war ended, Aribert Heim was captured by American soldiers. He was placed in a prisoner of war camp. He was held there for 2.5 years. During this time, authorities began investigating war crimes at Mauthausen. Other SS men from the camp, including the pharmacist Erich Wizicki, were put on trial in what were called the Mauthausen trials. They were found guilty and executed. However, Heim was not put on trial. The files about his service had been changed. The records no longer showed he was at Mauthausen. Instead, they showed a different assignment. Because of this, the Americans did not know he was a wanted camp doctor. They released him in December 1947. Heim returned to a normal life in Germany. He used his medical degree to work as a gynecologist in the town of Baden-Baden. He lived with his family. For many years, he was not disturbed. However, in the late 1950s, West German authorities began reinvestigating Nazi war crimes. Witnesses from Mauthausen gave statements about Dr. Death. Prosecutors finally connected the statements to Aribert Heim. In 1962, an arrest warrant was issued for him for the murders committed at Mauthausen. One day in 1962, Heim was at his medical practice. He called his home, and his son answered. His son told him that the police were at their house waiting for him. Heim understood immediately that he had been discovered. He did not return home. He drove away from Baden-Baden and began a life on the run. He first went to France, then to Spain. With help from old SS contacts, he eventually traveled to Morocco and then to Egypt. In Egypt, he lived in hiding. He converted to Islam and changed his name to Tariq Farid Hussein. He had money because he owned an apartment building in Germany. The rent money was sent to him so he could live. The German police and international Nazi hunters, like the Simon Wiesenthal Center, searched for him for decades. There were many false sightings. People claimed to see him in Spain, Chile, and Argentina. Police would follow leads, but they always found nothing. The investigation continued for over 40 years. German prosecutors offered a large reward for information. His case was featured on television shows about war criminals. His family in Germany always said they did not know where he was. Meanwhile, Haim lived quietly in Cairo. He became sick with rectal cancer. In 2009, a major break in the case happened. A German television network, ZDF, and the New York Times worked together on an investigation. They found Haim's passport, personal papers, and medical records in an apartment in Cairo. They tracked down his son, Rudiger Haim. Under pressure, Rudiger admitted the truth. He said he had visited his father in Egypt. He stated that Ari Bert Haim had died in a Cairo clinic on August 10, 1992, from cancer. He said Egyptian officials had buried his father in a poor person's grave, and the exact location was unknown. A German court examined the new evidence: the passport, the clinic records, and the son's testimony. In 2012, the court officially declared that Ari Bert Haim had died in Egypt in 1992. However, because there was no body to test for DNA, Nazi hunters from the Wiesenthal Center did not fully accept this. They kept his name on their most wanted list until 2013. Despite their doubts, the German authorities closed the case based on the evidence they had. Ari Bert Haim was never put on trial in a courtroom for his crimes. He never went to prison. He never said he was sorry. He lived a free life after the war for many years and died in his bed from illness. The victims of Mauthausen did not get to see justice served to him. The court's declaration of his death was the legal end to the long hunt for the man known as Dr. Death. The story of Ari Bert Haim shows how some war criminals escaped justice by hiding in plain sight and living under new names in distant countries. Story 8. Joseph Mengele was born on March 16, 1911, in the small German town of Günzburg in Bavaria. He was the oldest of 3 sons. His father, Karl Mengele, owned a factory that made farming machines. The family was well respected and financially comfortable. The factory did very well, especially during World War I, when it switched to making equipment for the military. As a child, Joseph was considered a very good student. He did well in school and was also interested in music, art, and skiing. In 1924, when he was 13 years old, he joined a nationalist youth group called the Greater German Youth League. He was an active member and even led the local group for a time. This was a common activity for young boys in Germany at that time. After finishing secondary school in 1930, Mengele left Günzburg to study at university. He first studied medicine at the University of Munich. After 2 semesters, he moved to the University of Bonn to continue his studies. In 1931, he joined a former soldiers' organization called Der Stahlhelm. This group was later absorbed into the Nazi Party's paramilitary wing. Mengele earned his first doctorate degree, a Ph.D., in 1935 from the University of Munich. His field of study was anthropology, which is the study of humans. His specific dissertation was about trying to find differences in the jawbones of people from different racial groups. This kind of racial science was popular in some academic circles at the time. In January 1937, he began working at a famous institute in Frankfurt called the Institute for Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene. His boss was a well-known geneticist named Ottmar von Verschuer, who was especially interested in studying twins. Mengele worked as his assistant. Here, Mengele began researching the genetic causes of physical traits like cleft palates. This work earned him a second doctorate, a medical degree, in 1937. While working as a medical resident in the city of Leipzig, Mengele met a woman named Irene Skonbein. They married in July 1939. Their only child, a son named Rolf, was born in 1944. During this period, Mengele joined two important organizations. He became a member of the Nazi Party in 1937. In 1938, he joined the SS, which was the Nazi Party's elite paramilitary organization. To do this, he had to get basic military training with mountain infantry troops. In 1940, with World War II underway, Mengele was called up for military service. He volunteered for the medical service of the Waffen-SS, which was the combat branch of the SS. For a time, he worked in an office in Poland that assessed people for Germanization, a process to determine if they were racially suitable to be considered German. By the end of 1940, he was assigned as a medical officer to the 5th SS Panzer Division Viking. This unit fought on the Eastern Front after Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. Mengele served with this combat unit for nearly 2 years. He was awarded medals for bravery, including the Iron Cross, for actions like rescuing soldiers from a burning tank. In mid-1942, he was seriously wounded near Rostov and was declared unfit for further frontline duty. After recovering from his wounds, he was transferred back to Berlin. He worked again briefly for his old mentor, Professor Verschuer, who now worked at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology. In April 1943, Mengele was promoted to the rank of captain in the SS. Following his promotion in April 1943, Joseph Mengele was transferred to a new assignment. His former mentor, Professor Verschuer, encouraged him to join the medical service of the concentration camp system. Mengele's application was accepted, and in May 1943, he was sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp complex in occupied Poland. Upon arrival, Mengele was appointed the chief physician of the Auschwitz II-Birkenau section. This section contained a special compound called the Gypsy Family Camp, where Romani people were imprisoned. One of his main duties was to perform selections. When new trainloads of Jewish people arrived at the camp, the SS doctors would meet them on the railway platform, known as the ramp. The doctors would quickly look at each person and point to one side or the other. The people pointed to the left were sent directly to the gas chambers to be killed. The people pointed to the right were sent into the camp as prisoners for forced labor. Mengele regularly performed this duty. He appeared calm and sometimes even smiled or whistled while deciding who would live and who would die immediately. Mengele also had another duty. He made weekly inspections of the hospital barracks inside the camp. Any prisoner who was still sick or weak after 2 weeks in the hospital was selected by him. These selected prisoners were then taken away and killed, usually with a phenol injection to the heart or by being sent to the gas chambers. He did this to control disease outbreaks and to make space in the barracks. Beyond these duties, Mengele used the prisoners at Auschwitz as subjects for his own medical research. He was particularly interested in genetics and human biology. He wanted to study heredity, which is how traits are passed from parents to children. The camp provided him with a large number of human subjects against their will. His most notorious research was on twins. When new transports arrived, he would look for twins on the selection ramp. If he found twins, he would separate them from their families and send them to special barracks instead of the gas chambers. He did this because he wanted to compare twins to each other. He believed studying twins could show what traits were inherited and what traits were influenced by the environment. He may have studied hundreds of pairs of twins, most of them children. The twins were treated slightly better than other prisoners at first. They were sometimes given more food, and Mengele would sometimes give them candy. However, they were subjected to frequent and painful examinations. Every week, they had to stand for hours while Mengele and his assistants measured every part of their bodies. He took detailed notes and drawings. He also took many blood samples, often from the twins' necks, which was very painful. The experiments went far beyond measurements. Mengele performed surgeries on twins without anesthesia. He would remove organs or limbs from one twin. If that twin died, he would then kill the other twin with a chloroform injection to the heart, so he could perform a comparative autopsy. He injected chemicals into children's eyes, possibly in an attempt to change their eye color to blue. He sewed twins together in attempts to create conjoined twins. He infected people with diseases on purpose to study how different twins reacted. Mengele also collected other people he found interesting. This included people with dwarfism, people with physical abnormalities, and people with heterochromia, 2 different colored eyes. He conducted painful experiments on them as well. He also ordered the skeletons of some of his murdered victims to be cleaned and sent to museums in Germany for further study. In the Romani camp, an outbreak of a deadly disease called noma occurred. This disease causes severe damage to the face. Mengele started a study on the children suffering from it. He had them isolated and initially provided some vitamins and medicine. A few children got better, but once he saw the treatment could work, he stopped it to see what would happen. The children quickly became sick again. When the Romani camp was later closed, all the remaining prisoners, including the sick children from his study, were killed in the gas chambers. Throughout this time, Mengele sent detailed reports, blood samples, tissue samples, and organs from his victims to his old professor, Verschuer, in Berlin. Verschuer used his connections to secure official research grants from German government agencies to fund Mengele's work at Auschwitz. In January 1945, as the Soviet army moved closer to Auschwitz, the SS began to evacuate the camp. Mengele packed up the records of his experiments and left on January 17th. He was transferred to another camp called Gross-Rosen. Before he left, he destroyed many other camp documents to hide evidence. 10 days later, the Soviet soldiers liberated Auschwitz and found the remaining prisoners. After leaving Auschwitz in January 1945, Joseph Mengele spent several months moving between different locations as the war ended. He was eventually captured by American forces in June 1945. However, he was not recognized. The lists of major war criminals were not well organized among the Allies, and Mengele had no identifying SS blood group tattoo. He also used a false story about his past. Because of this, the American authorities released him at the end of July 1945. For the next few years, Mengele lived quietly in Germany, working as a farmhand. He was in contact with his family. Fearing that he would be put on trial if found, he decided to leave Europe. With help from a network of former SS members, he traveled to Genoa, Italy. There, he got a Red Cross passport under the fake name Helmut Greger. Using this passport, he sailed to Argentina and arrived in July 1949. In Argentina, Mengele first worked as a carpenter. Later, he worked as a salesman for his family's farm machinery business. In 1956, using his real name, he even got official Argentine identity papers and a new West German passport. He traveled back to Europe to visit his son Rolf in Switzerland and his family in Günzburg. He returned to Argentina, where his wife Irene and his brother joined him. They bought a house in Buenos Aires. He also invested in a pharmaceutical company. During this time, people were looking for him. Nazi hunters like Simon Wiesenthal collected information. In 1959, a West German court issued an arrest warrant for Mengele. West Germany then asked Argentina to send him back to stand trial. By the time Argentina agreed, Mengele had already fled. He moved to Paraguay in 1959 and became a citizen there under the name José Mengele. In 1960, Israeli agents captured another Nazi war criminal, Adolf Eichmann, in Argentina. This event scared Mengele. He decided Paraguay was no longer safe. In 1960, with help from a Nazi sympathizer, he got false papers under the name Peter Hochbichler and entered Brazil. In Brazil, Mengel lived with a series of people who protected him. He stayed on farms owned by a Hungarian couple named Gaza and Gitta Stammer. They eventually learned his true identity, but were convinced by others not to go to the police. Over the years, Mengel's health declined. He suffered from high blood pressure and had a stroke in 1976. Meanwhile, official investigations continued but failed. West German police did not actively search for him in South America for many years. Israeli intelligence agency Mossad tried to find him in the early 1960s. They tracked one of his friends to a farm near Sao Paulo and believed they saw Mengel. However, the operation to capture him was called off because it was too difficult, expensive, and because other political issues in the Middle East became a higher priority. Other Mossad attempts in the later 1960s also found no solid clues. The search became more serious in the 1980s. In 1985, a new effort began with cooperation between West Germany, Israel, and the United States. The key break came from West German prosecutors. On May 31, 1985, police raided the home of Hans Sedlmayr in Günzburg. Sedlmayr was an old friend of Mengel and a manager at the Mengel family factory. In his house, police found address books and letters. The letters were between Sedlmayr and Wolfram Bossert, an Austrian man living in Brazil. The letters talked about Uncle and his death. West German authorities contacted police in Sao Paulo. The Brazilian police found and questioned Wolfram Bossert and his wife Lisa Lott. Under questioning, the Bosserts revealed the truth. They confessed that Joseph Mengel had been living in Brazil under the false name Wolfgang Gerhard. They said that on February 7, 1979, Mengel had been swimming with them at a beach resort called Bertioga. While swimming, he suffered a stroke and drowned. They had buried his body in a cemetery in Embu-das Artes under the name Wolfgang Gerhard. On June 6, 1985, Brazilian officials dug up the body from the grave. Forensic experts from many countries examined the bones. They used photographs, dental records, and measurements of the skull. The physical characteristics matched Mengel's known features. The initial scientific conclusion was that the skeleton was very likely that of Joseph Mengel. To be completely sure, in 1992, scientists used a new technology, DNA analysis. They took DNA from the bones in the grave. They compared it to DNA provided by Mengel's living son, Rolf. The DNA matched. This was the final, undeniable proof that Joseph Mengel had died in Brazil in 1979. No official trial was ever held for Joseph Mengel. He was never formally sentenced by a court for his crimes. Because he was dead, all legal cases against him were closed. The victims of his experiments and the families of those he killed received no direct legal justice from him. After the identification, the Brazilian authorities kept the skeleton. The Mengel family did not want it returned to Germany. Today, the bones are stored at the Sao Paulo Institute for Forensic Medicine. They are sometimes used as a teaching tool for medical students studying forensic science. The detailed story of his escape and the failure to capture him while he was alive showed how former Nazi networks helped war criminals evade justice for decades, and his remains now serve a silent educational purpose in a foreign country. Story 9. Joseph Fritzl was born on April 9, 1935, in a town called Amstetten in Austria. He was an only child. His father left the family when Joseph was 4 years old. Joseph's father later died as a soldier in World War II. Joseph was raised alone by his mother, Maria. Joseph's mother was very strict. She had to work hard and had little time for him. Joseph later said his mother would beat him often. He said the beatings were severe and made him feel humiliated. He said he never received kindness or hugs from her. He felt she only had him to prove she could have a child. Joseph went to school and was good with technical subjects. After school, he studied electrical engineering at a technical college. He got a job at a large steel company in a city named Linz. Later, he worked for a construction materials firm in his hometown. Eventually, he worked as a salesman for technical equipment, which required him to travel across Austria. In 1956, when he was 21 years old, Joseph married a 17-year-old woman named Rosemary. Together, they moved into a large apartment building in Amstetten that Joseph owned. They also bought a guest house and a campsite by a lake called Mondsee. They managed this property for many years. Joseph and Rosemary had 7 children together. Their first daughter, Elizabeth, was born on April 6, 1966. Joseph was known as a hard-working and serious man. He made money from his job, his rental apartments, and the lakeside business. To people outside his family, he seemed normal and successful. However, inside the home, he was very controlling. He made all the decisions for his wife and children. He demanded strict obedience. In 1967, when Joseph was 32, he was arrested for a serious crime. He had broken into a woman's apartment in Linz and raped her while threatening her with a knife. He was found guilty and spent 18 months in prison, though he served only 12 months. According to Austrian law at the time, this criminal record was erased after 15 years. Because of this, many people later did not know about his past. After his mother became old, she came to live with Joseph and his family in their Amstetten home. Over time, their relationship changed. Joseph became the one in control. He later admitted that he eventually locked his mother in the attic of the house. He told neighbors she had died. She remained locked away until her actual death from natural causes in 1980. Joseph had a basement in his family home. In the early 1980s, he began to work on this basement secretly. He obtained a building permit to extend the basement, but he planned to build much more than the permit allowed. He single-handedly began digging out extra rooms behind the official walls. He installed a concrete door that was very heavy and could be hidden. During this time, his daughter Elizabeth was growing up. As a teenager, she began to rebel against his strict rules. In early 1983, when she was 17, she ran away to Vienna with a friend. The police found her and brought her back home after 3 weeks. She finished a course to become a waitress and was offered a job in another city. Joseph Fritzl's early life was one of hardship under a severe mother, followed by a life where he built a respectable outer image. Inside his home, he ruled with absolute control. His past contained a violent crime, a secret imprisonment of his own mother, and a secretly constructed basement space whose full purpose was not yet known. On August 28, 1984, Elizabeth Fritzl turned 18. Shortly after her birthday, her father, Joseph, asked her to come down to the basement. He told her he needed help to carry a heavy door into place. Elizabeth followed him. The door was for the hidden entrance to the secret rooms he had built. When Elizabeth held the door in position, Joseph quickly put a cloth soaked in a chemical called ether over her face. She lost consciousness. He then dragged her through the door into the hidden dungeon and locked it. Elizabeth woke up in a small, sealed room. She was now a prisoner. The room was about 35 square meters. It had a bed, a small hot plate for cooking, and a refrigerator. There was a toilet and a wash basin. The ceiling was very low. There was no natural light. Joseph had installed heavy locks on the metal door and an electronic entry system that only he could operate. After Elizabeth disappeared, her mother, Rosemary, reported her missing to the police. Almost a month later, Joseph gave the police a letter. He said Elizabeth had sent it. The letter said Elizabeth had run away to join a friend and that she was tired of her family. It warned her parents not to look for her. Joseph told the police he believed she had joined a religious cult. The police accepted this explanation and closed the missing person case. Joseph began visiting the dungeon regularly. He would bring food and supplies. He also began to sexually assault and rape his daughter. This happened often, sometimes multiple times a week. Elizabeth could not escape. The door was too strong, and she did not know the electronic code. In 1988, Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter, Kirsten. Joseph was the father. The birth happened alone in the dungeon without any medical help. Over the next years, more children were born. A son, Stefan, was born in 1990. In 1992, a daughter named Lisa was born. After Lisa was a few months old, Joseph took her out of the dungeon. He left her in a cardboard box at the door of his upstairs home. He made Elizabeth write a note, which he placed with the baby. The note said the mother could not care for the child and begged the family to take the baby in. Joseph and his wife Rosemary took Lisa in. They told authorities and neighbors that Elizabeth had abandoned her child on their doorstep. Joseph applied to be the child's legal guardian. The social services office approved him. They did not know he was the baby's father or that Elizabeth was imprisoned. His old criminal record had been erased, so no one checked his past. In 1994, another daughter, Monica, was born in the cellar. When she was 10 months old, Joseph took her upstairs. He left her in a stroller outside the house. He then played a tape recording of Elizabeth's voice on the phone to his wife, asking her to care for the baby. Rosemary called the police, confused about how her missing daughter knew their new phone number. Again, Joseph was allowed to foster the child. The dungeon was very cramped for the growing family. Elizabeth begged for more space. Joseph finally agreed. He forced Elizabeth and her children to dig out more earth from behind the cellar walls with their bare hands. This took years. They expanded the prison to about 55 square meters, creating more small rooms. In 1996, Elizabeth gave birth to twin boys, Alexander and Michael. Michael died just 3 days after birth. Joseph took the dead baby's body out of the cellar and burned it in the home's furnace. He left the surviving twin, Alexander, with Elizabeth for over a year. Then, in 1997, he took Alexander upstairs and presented him as another abandoned child. Joseph and Rosemary fostered him as well. The last child, Felix, was born in the cellar in 2002. Joseph decided to keep Felix downstairs with Elizabeth, Kirsten, and Stefan. He told Elizabeth his wife was too old to care for another baby. Life in the dungeon was harsh. Joseph controlled everything. He would sometimes punish them by turning off the electricity, leaving them in complete darkness, or by not bringing food for days. He told them the door was rigged to electrocute them if they touched it. He also said he could pump poison gas into the rooms if they disobeyed him. This was a lie, but they believed him. The children who grew up downstairs had never seen sunlight, rain, or the outside world. Elizabeth taught them to read and write using books Joseph brought. They had a television and a video player. Upstairs, Joseph lived a normal life with his wife and the 3 children he had taken from the cellar. He was a retired grandfather to the neighbors. He continued to manage his rental properties. Every day, he would go into the basement, telling his wife he was working on his projects. He often slept there, so his wife became used to his absences. For 24 years, this was the situation. Elizabeth and her 3 captive children lived in the hidden dungeon. Joseph visited to bring supplies and to commit assaults. 3 other children lived upstairs, believing their mother had abandoned them. Rosemary lived in the same house, unaware that her daughter and grandchildren were imprisoned just meters below her. On April 19, 2008, Kirsten, the eldest daughter living in the cellar, became very sick. She was unconscious and had a high fever. Joseph Fritzl knew she needed a doctor. He agreed to take her to the hospital. Elizabeth carried Kirsten to the cellar door. For the first time in 24 years, Elizabeth stepped out of the dungeon and into the basement hallway. She saw the outside world through a door before Joseph forced her to go back into the cellar. Joseph then took Kirsten to the local hospital in Amstetten by himself. At the hospital, doctors found Kirsten was in critical condition with kidney failure. Joseph told them a story. He said Kirsten was his granddaughter and that her mother, Elizabeth, had abandoned her years ago. He said a note had suddenly arrived from Elizabeth, asking him to care for the sick girl. The doctors were confused. They did not understand why the mother would not come forward when her child was so ill. On April 21st, the hospital staff alerted the police. The police made a public appeal on television and radio. They asked Elizabeth Fritzl, the missing mother, to come to the hospital to help her daughter. Joseph then gave the police another letter he claimed was from Elizabeth. It was dated months earlier. He said she was still with a cult and could not come. A church official, who was an expert on cults, reviewed the letter. He told the police the letter sounded dictated and the cult story did not seem real. Meanwhile, Elizabeth pleaded with her father to let her see her dying daughter. On April 26th, Joseph finally released Elizabeth and her two sons, Stefan and Felix, from the cellar. He brought them upstairs and told his wife, Rosemary, that Elizabeth had finally decided to come home. That evening, Joseph and Elizabeth went to the hospital to see Kirsten. A doctor at the hospital had tipped off the police. As soon as they arrived, the police detained both Joseph and Elizabeth and took them to the police station for questioning. At the police station, Elizabeth was very afraid. She only agreed to talk after the police promised she would never have to see her father again. She then told them everything. She explained how her father had locked her in the cellar 24 years ago, repeatedly raped her, and fathered her 7 children. She described the births, the death of one baby, and the life in the dungeon. The police were shocked. They arrested Joseph Fritzl that same night on suspicion of severe crimes including rape, false imprisonment, and incest. On the night of April 27th, police officers, following Joseph's instructions, entered the secret cellar. They found the hidden door behind a shelf, opened by an electronic code. They confirmed Elizabeth's story. Elizabeth, her 6 surviving children, and Rosemary were all taken into protective care by the state. DNA tests were done immediately. The results, announced on April 29th, proved Joseph Fritzl was the biological father of all of Elizabeth's children. The police investigation gathered more evidence. They interviewed past tenants of the Fritzl house. Some recalled hearing strange noises from the basement, which Joseph had explained as pipes rattling. The police also learned that Joseph had been planning a story for Elizabeth's eventual release. He had forced her to write a letter saying she wanted to come home. Police believe he was going to pretend he had rescued her from the cult. Joseph Fritzl was charged with many crimes. The most serious was murder for the death of the infant Michael, who died from lack of medical care. He was also charged with rape, incest, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and slavery. His trial began on March 16, 2009. At first, he pleaded not guilty to murder. But during the trial, the court watched an 11-hour video of Elizabeth's testimony. One day, Elizabeth came to the courtroom in disguise. When Joseph saw her, he changed his mind. On March 19, 2009, Joseph Fritzl pleaded guilty to all charges. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment. Under Austrian law, this meant he must serve at least 15 years before he could ask for parole. He was sent to a high-security prison housed in a former monastery. After the trial, Elizabeth and her children received ongoing medical and psychological care. They had to learn how to live in the world. The children who grew up in the cellar needed therapy to cope with sunlight, open spaces, and social interactions. All the children, including the 3 raised upstairs, needed help to understand the trauma. They were given new identities and moved to a secret, secure location to live a private life. Joseph Fritzl's house in Amstetten was eventually emptied, and the basement was filled with concrete. The property was sold years later. In prison, Fritzl changed his last name. His requests to be moved to a regular prison or a nursing home have been reviewed by courts and mostly denied. He remains incarcerated. The family has worked hard to build a normal life. Reports indicate that Elizabeth and her children support each other and have found a degree of peace away from public attention. The justice system ensured the perpetrator was imprisoned for life, and the victims were given a chance to heal.